Welcome to the Workforce Situation Room, where we spotlight some of the promising and innovative solutions that address some of our most pressing workforce and economic challenges, getting in the way of our mission at Workforce Solutions Borderplex. That mission is to power the people with the tools and opportunity to reach their potential in the workforce, and ultimately, our goal is to develop area businesses and the economy. I'm Bianca, your host, and I stand alongside our ladies of leadership at Workforce Solutions Borderplex with Leila Melendez, our CEO, Alma Aranda, Workforce Development Director, and Karina Castillo, our Senior Research Analyst. In this room, we all believe every situation has a solution. Here's the situation. As the pandemic creeped into daily life, the education sector was one of the hardest hit since March of 2020. Just over a year later, students are tumbling from the drain of online learning, isolation, financial instability in the household, mental health struggles, and in some cases, family tragedy. The list goes on. Although the subject of education is one of countless situations that need TLC and repair, education is at the forefront of our priorities. Before we even begin to talk solutions, though, we decided to take a pause and hear directly from those impacted. This only offers a small peek into the realities, but it begins to paint a picture of their stories and guide us in writing the next chapter when it comes to the workforce and the economy. Note that this is part one of the education series. We will hear from teachers, faculty, and others that we feel can contribute to solutions in future episodes.
But even in the first 2 weeks, students are falling behind again. Everything is just like stress and anxiety. Me and my roommates are just like, we're done with this. One of my roommates has like an assignment already late and it's the third week. And there's like papers and essays that you just see there and you're like, okay, I'll do it eventually. But eventually turns into a month or two. There's just like this strain on you that you don't understand. Like, you don't want to let yourself down, but at some point you kind of just have to realize that I cannot do this anymore.
One of the main difficulties is the lack of motivation and confidence. It's a little bit boring still. Everyone, including myself, I think the main difficulty has been the lack of motivation and just feeling drained and tired from this whole pandemic.
School just seems like no one's worry, even for professors. Professors would say, here's an assignment, just do it whenever you can. We're giving you guys like a loophole kind of thing, like extra credit just to get you guys over this hill that everyone's kind of going through.
Like, I was a pretty good student, but like now it's just like, I don't even know what this is. I actually failed my first class in like 4 years.
I think one of the major difficulties is trying to learn how to make the appropriate space to learn at home. I have like roommates who are also in college, so it'll be hard sometimes because we'll all have class at the same time.
Like, when I was actually at school, like, I would actually do my work. Like, I have so many distractions at home. Oh, I have my PlayStation right here. Like, I could just play it and the teacher's not even going to know. Or I could turn in my work later and like just say that I had Wi-Fi issues or something. And like, I never used to be like that, but like now I just wait and procrastinate. And I just think like that's just like so bad that I built that over this pandemic.
Having all of your papers and everything put online, it took a real toll on how much you had to switch over from partial computer time looking at readings and stuff like that to almost 8-9 hours a day. You just saw everyone falling behind, not turning in assignments. School was optional, like completely optional, not even like relevant at this point. And I know I was one of those students who did fall behind. I had assignments that were a month late. My roommate was just like, I don't want to do this, because we were just so exhausted and mentally drained from everything happening. It was a really, really tough quarter. And so talking to professors, like, they give us extensions and give us extra time, but I don't think they really understand how tolling this has been. It's been really, really stressful. And that's just with school. And then there's like the whole social anxiety that's been happening, because you're used to seeing 500, 600 people on campus a day. And this is our first year here. Maybe people finding apartments for the first time, people trying to figure out buying groceries for the first time because they had never done that before. No one really helped us in that department because the school was focusing on school stuff.
Even when I went to school, like when they were allowing people to go back to school, like, I wouldn't do anything either because the teacher would just be teaching through the screen and not like physically teach there. So like I just stopped going to school. I think that's just like a terrible habit that I have now.
Like my college experience has been cut short, and I know many people also seem to experience that, especially if you're a first-time freshman and this is your first college experience or graduating senior. But I also know teachers and professors are also feeling the COVID anxiety and just overall drained from it. You could just see that. I think the general sense is everyone just wants this COVID thing to be over.
That's a pretty well-rounded perspective, and that's just 4 students, right? And they're all from different parts of El Paso, different parts. They're in different regions right now. Even the 2 high school students are from completely different high schools. So that kind of gives you a small peek into what we're dealing with. But where do we even start? I mean, do we talk about grading? Do we talk about mental health, physical health, excitement for life? I mean, where do we even begin? Obviously, we have a terrible situation or situations, and we're not here to try to find the solution right now. But what within the wheelhouse of workforce solutions, where do we even begin to start scratching at the surface for this?
Layla had talked about having these listening sessions. We don't always have the solution. I mean, hearing the different perspectives from the students, it was hard to hear because as an adult, we're feeling a lot of the same thing. Somebody who's 18, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, that's got to be something completely different at a whole other level. I mean, development-wise, to be thrown into that. I mean, I think where we start is by listening instead of trying to force what we think is the solution as an adult or even within our own scope. I mean, there's going to be so many different players here who are going to be tunnel vision with what they think they need to look out for, right? And we have state metrics to serve youth, to outreach, to engage them. But I think we're going to have to pause and really listen, instead of trying to force them to do something else again. Mm-hmm. It's clearly not working. I mean, this not one student said, I'm crushing it. I love it. You know what I mean? So, I mean, from mental health to being intrusive, one of the students talked about being thrown into adulthood. And believe it or not, like that, it got me. I'm just thinking, I'm here in my community. I'm in my own home. I have all those things for security. And this young lady, I mean, she's somewhere else, right? And she doesn't necessarily have that. Even when she was talking about like, for the students that were used to going to campus to have meals. At the end of the day, what I'm hopeful is that they're going to be even more resilient.
Absolutely. And I think you're very right about trying to think that we know the answer, because even some of them are talking about going back already. Mm-hmm. And okay, everything is going to come back to normal now that the vaccines are over and
are happening. Right? Extending school to make up for the lost time. I mean, that's.
And even going back, thinking there's still teachers doing the online teaching. So one student goes back and he's like, what's the point? She's still just looking at the screen. One thing that I never expected to hear was, okay, so now we're going back. And I still, now I'm so used to being at home.
Habits.
Yeah.
There was a gentleman that said, he's developed, how are you going to break that? That procrastination, the distraction, those are things that you learn as a young adult, right? Mm-hmm. There's an acclimation of discipline, and we kind of skipped out on that. Again, at the end of the day, I'm a believer that things pass and, something good will come of it. Mm-hmm. I'm hopeful in that. So they'll be very strong and resilient, and who knows what they're going to create, right? But right now, I mean, that's the thing is they don't have that perspective yet. It's going to take a lot of really listening and letting go of, the money, the funding, mm-hmm. the work, everything that we think we try to do to help youth. I think we're going to have to really kind of pause and listen.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts, Layla or Karina?
I think everybody has difficulties right now during COVID, but I think that the most difficult are the underserved community, those that low income. Why? Because in my case, okay, I'm middle class and I can provide my daughter with food, I have a job.
Right.
But what about those that they don't have a job, that they have children, that daycare they closed? They need to take care of their children because I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. This is what it feels like. This is the reality of it.
I have a friend that she lost her job.
Mm-hmm.
And then she didn't know what to do with her daughter. This is very important for us to help all these low-income individuals, to give them resources.
Mm-hmm.
If we feel isolated, imagine how they feel that have low income.
Right. We're already dealing with stresses, but we're okay. And how does that feel for those that are dealing with the stresses of being home, but then the stresses of how do you keep a roof over your head? How do you feed the kids?
Or even the child knowing that they lost a family because of COVID.
Right.
It's another issue. And how can I'm going to be going in online classes when I'm thinking about what all these problems that I have in my family?
Absolutely.
The loss of employment, the loss of family, or fear to get infected.
Layer upon layer.
The social issues, because as you're saying that, Karina, I'm thinking one of the students talked about social anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And, my mind immediately went to it. And like everything that has happened, even on top of COVID, like on top of all of that, you still add like all these other things. And that's where being with your peers, having some safety net, but their safety net was taken away.
Education's just gone by the wayside, right? It's just, there's so many other things that who cares about what your grades are going to be, but it's still affecting them. Like even if they're not carrying, at the end of it, it's like, oh my gosh, I have a scholarship,
right?
Or I have a grade,
mm-hmm.
or I have a job that I want to apply to after this, or maybe I want to get my master's. So what are your thoughts, Layla?
Gosh, there is so much here, and it's overwhelming to figure out what to think of and what to process. I've been in the practice of just deal with your emotions and what your thoughts are and process it. But I'm like, where do I start? Here's one thought. I'm going down this process. Here's another thought, so it is overwhelming. But struck me was we heard from young people in high school and in college. And I look back at our history, and adults have always put themselves in this position of authority, but we have no idea what we're doing. We're all on the same boat right now. So many of the things that these young people said, the person that said that he's developed new habits, I know that I've also developed bad habits. The distractions, the boundaries, the Zoom intrusiveness, all of those things are things that we are also dealing with as adults. For us, what I'm hopeful for is that we reflect and that we learn how to care a little bit differently about what's going on. And me as the leader of the organization, what's really important to me that we do is checking our ego and not coming up with the answers for anybody. We need to take into account what people really do need and what they do want. And everybody's different. That's the difficulty of our responsibility, is coming up with multiple pathways to get to the same place. Everybody wants a job. Everybody wants an education. There's going to be different roads to get there. But what's really important is that we don't rush it. To Karina's point, absolutely, we do have a responsibility to help those that are less fortunate than we are. But if we are not healthy and we are not ready, we are going to be of no use to anybody. We have to really help ourselves, like in the airlines where when you get on a plane and they tell you, make sure you put oxygen on yourself first before you give oxygen to your child. That's a hard instinct, because the first thing you want to do is take care of your kid. But if you're not healthy yourself, you're not going to be of no good to anybody else. And we are in that first seat. We are in that first role. We have to take care of ourselves first so that we can then help the next. And this organization, we have to make sure that we understand that and identify, do you knowingly want to be in that first seat because we have to take care of ourselves first, or not? Because our role is to then take care of the person next to us. And I think we've known that that's what our organization does, but it's now clear and it's much more apparent. I think we have to be very slow and steady and not feel the pressure to solve problems or to come up with solutions. Going back to some of the comments, someone was talking about adulting. It was, boom, you're an adult. You have no choice. You've heard this phrase before, I'm sure. It's not the destination, it's the journey. Their experience, their journey, they didn't have a journey. They didn't have an experience. They just showed up. But I also want them to know, I think it's really important for youth to know that we are also feeling that. Just because we're adults and just because we know how to buy groceries and we know how to, deal with our jobs, not that I want them to feel sorry for us or do anything for us. I just want them to know that we're on the same level and we're not any better. And we have to now rely on one another a little bit differently than we did years ago in order to get to the next place. The relationship that I look at with my daughter now is much different than what I expected it to be when she was born, but different from the relationship that my mother and I had, just because of what we've all gone through. I look at that with hope that on the other end of that is a completely different world, better, that we've learned our lesson. Somebody else said, like, they're going through the motions, and I'm wondering, are they learning anything? Or are they just submitting papers? Are they just getting great? Are they actually learning anything in their topics? That we're all learning a lesson, I hope, but are we actually learning a skill? Are we learning a discipline? Are we learning something?
And that's all four of them said, like, they're basically just turning in. And
papers.
Even when they're not turning it in, they're getting extensions. And, one said, one's half-assing it, one is just turning it in, or not doing it, or even just opting out not to do it.
And that's a horrible feeling to finish college on.
Yeah.
You'd hate to finish college and say, I didn't learn a damn thing. Nobody wants to do that. You want to have pride in the hard work that you put into and in what you learned, and in not just in surviving. You don't want to have pride in just surviving. You want to have pride in that you worked really hard for something. And that's what I'm worried about for my daughter and what she's going to have to deal with. Is she going to really be proud of what she's learned, or just like, I just got through it?
It's interesting though, because I mean, sometimes I reflect and I'm like, if only I would have, and I mean, and that doesn't even compare to what they're going through, right? But I'm just also wondering, like, the long-term effects. We're dealing with residual effects and possible anxiety and other things. I mean, the student, when he said, I was a good student, that was kind of hard to hear. I mean, in his voice, he said it like I was, and now I'm not, and he said he failed, a class, and I'm like, that you're still good. You know what I mean? Yeah. But you can hear that the way he said it. And even the one that was talking a little bit about, she can see the teachers are like done, what after effects is that going to carry through? Because at the same time, I know, like, what resources are really there, right?
And then when you talk about resources, what are the resources? Let's say obviously universities are offering mental health, and schools are even probably offering mental health. I know that there are employers that are offering mental health assistance, but this is also virtual.
And that's exactly what I'm saying. Like, if they're telling you, like, I am exhausted on being in another Zoom meeting, and well-intended resources, right? Like, well, we have a counselor, but it's going to be a Zoom meeting. You know what I mean? I just, it's one of those things. Like, and even as a parent right now, I'm at a loss. When my daughter's telling me I can barely wake up, like I'm tired. And she's like, but I slept all day, or things like that. And I can hear it in her voice. So
they're not motivated. Right now, the students are not motivated. My daughter, I see my daughter.
I'm not motivated.
Yeah. That's true, because, and she, like, I see her, like, in the morning, like, you look like you were sleeping, and that were you in class? Like, yeah, mom, but it's boring.
Mhm.
I'm not I'm not interested in learning that. I'm not learning anything. And that's why I think she's losing. She's very confident. And now I don't see her confident. Like her confidence went down.
Mhm.
Like
And the joy, really
Right.
quick, the student that talked about how she would dedicate 3 to 4 hours, right? Obviously she enjoyed that, to practice. And I'm assuming it's an instrument, right? But there was probably joy and dedication in that and discipline. Then that kind of gets cut out. And that's, again, going back to, not to try to sound doomsday, but I mean, we talk about the after effects on the economy of COVID, to businesses, what's going to happen. But in that recovery, when we're thinking of that, I think it's going to be really important that we, as you said it's not even beyond listening, it's actually caring and what we're going to do with these residual effects.
Who's counseling the counselors? That's what I worry about. You know what I mean?
We had a request.
and all the teachers.
Yeah.
Because it's difficult to manage
absolutely.
20 students since the first grade until and see if they are learning or not, because you're only giving assignments.
That's right. But you talked about resources, right? So it's like, oh, great, let's get a whole bunch of therapists.
What about them?
Who's providing therapy to the therapists? The therapists are inundated with people. There's all these apps. There's this huge demand now for
Mental
this
health.
entire industry that is on the brink. So who's helping them, right? So it's just this constant, like this tsunami that keeps hitting different areas. At first it was restaurants, and then school, and then families, and then now it's their, mental. So you just boom.
Yeah,
boom,
it's like, as we're cleaning up, we're discovering, oh shoot, this also happened here,
You're right.
But this was really interesting because we provide incumbent worker training for employers. One of the requests was mental health training for HR. And if they're feeling it at an HR level, which, I'm assuming it's a lot of adults and things like that, you're right. The school counselors.
Yeah,
I mean, if they were strained before with
Yeah.
all of the admin scheduling, so this is like a whole other level,
because
right?
the counseling that counselors do were where to go to college, right? Where's the FAFSA application? That stuff. Not like I gotta vent. And my daughter, my daughter is not afraid to tell me exactly what she thinks, and I might tell her something because I'm the mom and I'm the adult, but she'll turn around and tell me the same thing. Like if I would have told her the decisions that you make in school will affect you the rest of your life or will have an impact on your school, she'll turn around and tell me the decisions that you make as a CEO are going to have an impact on your organization. And I'll be like, oh,
Like on the entire Board of Place community.
And I'll be like, you're right. And she's right because she checks me. And that's what I just on a daily basis, check yourself, because the decisions that you're making, whether you're a student or whether you're an adult, wherever you identify yourself with in any role, you can be in multiple roles, is going to have an impact on not just you, but the people around you. That's what we have to be very slow about, I think, is as we emerge. Yes, we emerge from the public health crisis, perhaps, but don't be so fast to think that we're out of the woods. We have all of the effects that we are going to have to deal with for a long time.
And we're not going to be, I don't know how long it will take us for us to be how we were before COVID, because we don't know if we're going to be there.
Will we?
I don't think we ever will. I don't think
so. Yeah, me neither. I don't think we're going to be okay, the students already lost a year. They won't recuperate that time. I know we will have tutors, we will have teachers, counselors helping, but it will be time that they already lost, that we already lost, that we need to kind of be on top and helping them and helping us to help them.
Well, you're definitely going to see that with the after reaction, with the reaction of students that have lost the time. Those with resources that aren't low income or don't have barriers may very well overcome this over time. You may not see that domino effect of the lack of education with them for too long. But those that do have the barriers, they flunked a year. And usually when a student flunks, they start over, and sure, they're going to be a little older than the rest of the kids, but they get another chance to recuperate. Here, nobody's going to be able to start their year over. Everybody flunked their last year, and they might even flunk the first half of their next, and they don't get to make it up. But where I think we're going to see those impacts, higher income students, students with resources are definitely going to make it out. But those with lower incomes that are dealing with all of those pressures to have to even quit, maybe they can't even go back because they have those pressures that you were talking about earlier, Karina, with they have to work. They can't go back to school. They can't prioritize education right now because we need to eat. So, I don't know that we're going to see things go back to normal.
I hope that we all rethink these structures that we've designed over history. But what does that even mean? What does a year mean? What does a semester
how do you
mean?
quantify that loss?
How do you exactly, like, it doesn't, we need to shed those
metrics kind of, right?
Not just the metrics, but the institutions. I'll give you an example. Years ago, I had heard about how in school there was the group of kids that needed a different outlet. They were the ones that doodled. They would graffiti their lockers or walls or whatever, and they were quote unquote the bad kid. And there was no track for them. There was one school system, and everybody's supposed to learn and absorb and measure the exact same way. But you've got different types of people that process differently, learn differently. They're more visual. They're more, they're more creative and spiritual. They needed a different outlet. And we've never designed those different things into our education system. We've never allowed people to learn differently. Like, all of these kids have to go through the same pipeline and then expect the same thing, and then expect everybody to be a good person and everybody to just conform and everybody to be successful, be rich and not get in trouble and all of these things. You expect the same thing out of all of these different people. And I'm hopeful that we learn enough to let that shed and rebuild. Now, that doesn't happen overnight. You don't just undo something and do it. Our natural instinct is to hold on to something. But I think that it is extremely worthwhile to let go of that security and
that's really
and redesign it.
Literally, there's one track, right? There's one track. And then not only that, you're graded on it. You're an A, B, C, D, or F, right?
That's right.
And that's it. And that's all you know for 12 years. This one
You're
track.
Conditioned.
And so,
way.
And then a disruptor happens like this. In a very broad scope, it levels everybody out. Not level them equally because some are going to be impacted more, depending on resources.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you're saying we got to check our ego, is learning a lot, working here through the leadership and the development that I'm getting exposed with is you got to check yourself, and somebody else might have the answer or explore that. Right. And so, when all of this happened, our systems were not prepared to go online. But quite honestly, there were a lot of school systems that had been doing it online for a long time. I'm hoping that they really kind of go to that. And how is it that you keep the kids motivated? What do you do? You know what I mean? There's multiple facets. I mean, you've got to be careful. How are you treating your staff? What are you doing for yourself to help them get through these? And granted, in this moment, it was make or break, right? They didn't have time to develop. But to your point, I hope that with this, there's a lot of purpose in kind of allowing for a possible redesign versus we just want to get back to the way things were. Have the humility and compassion to allow ourselves to redesign and not hold on to something.
And I'm definitely not the expert with education in sector or even the economic sector. I'm still to this day learning, but it's almost as if this falling apart of both means that maybe they come together and that's just the fusion of these two versus looking at them as two separate, because they are the same thing. Education is essentially preschool of economics.
That's right. Absolutely.
Why aren't we why isn't that? And we're figuring this out. And as a workforce development board, we do that with our programs, but we're just one tiny aspect of the entire thing, right? But why not make this the law or make it what it has to be? Because if everybody was fusing these things together and teachers were teaching based on what they know economic developers or workforce developers are doing, I see cohesion. I see possibility there. I see people understanding what we're trying to do and us understanding what they're trying to do and just making it work. Duh. I don't know. That's just like me. But again, I don't know enough. I'm just kind of my observation of it. But what I'm taking away from all of these conversations is if we had 2 buttons to push right now, I would push reset and I would push empathize. Because reset, going back to your point, Layla, we need to take care of ourselves. And students need to stop. And that NPR article about teachers at their breaking point before everything really starts falling apart in that area, everybody just needs to stop. And a lot of people can't because they can't afford it. I don't know how that's going to get resolved financially, but as far as a reset button, pause. I don't know how reset has to happen, but that's what the conversation that needs to be started. Give everybody a month vacation.
Right.
Like, can everybody just stop
Like
the world? Can we
yes.
pause it for a month and just let everyone kind of just chill without the worries of whatever? I know that the stimulus was intended to try to do that, but that was just too little too late.
For 2 weeks, when they got the check, like Best Buy was. I went the first check that they did. I went to Best Buy to buy. I remember I was like, oh my God, this seems like Christmas. Like a lot of people in Best Buy. Okay.
And that's the human nature of it, is we will gravitate to what we know, and the security of stability, and it's materialistic, and it's, and that's the difficult. I admit I'll do that too, so that's just the hard part, because I think of us and I'm thinking, as you're talking, Bianca, I'm like, we're the new dinosaurs, like we kind of out, but behave.
Well, I was thinking about the media, the when you, it's funny that you said the dinosaurs, because that's the image that came. I was like, where are we in the scope of, evolution and, geological changes, yes. Right? That's the thing. And like, what comes out of that? And then there's residual and there's leftover, and it might be repurposed in a different way that we never expected, right? So Pangea just
yeah, right. I'm not a I follow certain accounts on Twitter, and one of them is God, and he posts these things, and I think about them all the time, and I sometimes I tweet at him, and I'm like, God, cue the meteor, like I can't take it anymore, just do it, because I think of God looking down like, oh. So I just think, and that helps ground me, I think, and get over the fear, because I can very easily get scared, get anxious, and get overwhelmed. And then I think, how much control do I really have, just myself, over any of this? Whatever we decide, whatever steps we take, however we move forward, that we just try to do our best one day at a time. And that's it. That's all you can expect. That's all you can really control.
So I'm going to go nerd here more. But, as you're saying all of that, I'm thinking, I just, when we're talking about the after effects and different things to cope, is it really needs to be a call to action. This is very real. Aside from, with the empathy and all of that, absolutely, it's important. But if we don't do this right now, there is a very real thing, which is called the socioeconomic burden of health. This will have an impact. And I think we need to really ground ourselves. And before it impacts us, let's do something. Because as much as we've had to react to everything that COVID brought on, or the last, year and a half, lots of crazy stuff going on. I don't know that we can pause for a month and everybody take a vacation, but we definitely need to pause and start thinking, what can we proactively try to do? Because again, I mean, those indicators do really have lasting impacts on communities. And this is a far stretch. So if there are populations or communities that are already impacted more than others, this is just going to amplify that even more.
And then, I mean, you add the not having, I mean, being isolated, being at home, being on lockdown, not going outside,
Those
the
things
exercise
manifest.
stuff,
Anxiety,
mental
all those
health.
things, if they're not addressed, they will manifest physically one way or another. I mean, your body's just designed to do that, right? It's going to manifest one way or another.
Absolutely. Then, in the spirit of WSB's optimism, I kind of want to just really quickly talk about what you all see as silver linings in this whole situation. Yes, it's tragic, no matter how we look at it, but I picked up a few silver linings, and I'm curious to hear what you may have picked up out of this whole, out of listening to the students and our discussion. I found a few that I kind of wasn't expecting to see. I don't know. Do you guys have any yet? Or I can start.
Go ahead, start.
So, mental health had a stigma before this. You couldn't admit depression. You couldn't admit anxiety. Eyes were rolling. It was very gaslit of a situation. Personally, having dealt with it, I never really publicly talked about it because it was like embarrassing almost, right? But it's an illness. And to have seen that, unfortunately, everybody had to go through mental illness almost. I would say 99% of the population is probably depressed right now. It's now an accepted thing. And it's terrible that it's an accepted thing, but is now an accepted thing. So after we come out of this, it's going to be something that people aren't afraid to speak about anymore and will be addressed and will be taken seriously. It's an after effect, but it's going to be important because once we do finally get out of this quicksand, maybe 10 years down the road, people can now say, hey, I have depression. Oh my gosh. It will be taken seriously, or so I hope. So that's one silver lining that I noticed. You hear the students talk about how they suddenly had to start adulting with no choice, like boom, figure it out. My adulting was gradual. So while I was balancing school and education, it was a luxury to have to, Dad, I can't pay the bills or whatever. We could get into it gradually. The fact that they got pushed into it so quickly, they kind of got a PhD in adulting way before we did, or before a lot of us did in this generation. So once they do get to focus on this education more fully, they're the adulting's out of the way. It's second nature to them now. So they'll have one less thing to worry about as an adult, or at least the skills that they need with adulting. So I thought that was cool because I remembered something you mentioned at the beginning of COVID, Layla, that a lot of stay-at-home moms or people that were staying at home, juggling a ton of stuff, those are soft skills. That's project management. That's, those kinds of things, being able to do all of this and put that on your resume. Your gap as a stay-at-home mom is not a bad thing. You've learned project management skills. You've learned how to juggle like a CEO. You're juggling maintenance, you're juggling food, you're juggling school, all these things. And that's something to brag about, I think. And that's, again, another silver lining that you can still put. We just kind of normalize it. I think it would be our job to start a campaign or something like, hey, if you worked from home or if you're a mom, even a stay-at-home mom, those are great things because now we can trust that you can handle everything. It kind of spotlights women's abilities or even men's, whoever had to deal with that. It's another one. Call it the school of hard knocks.
I think that definitely, I think that's big. It's sad that it had to happen this way in order to be able to have real conversations. The silver lining, I think, here in just having two daughters that are in college is, we keep talking about this new normal, the new world of work. We know where it's going. It's going to be remote. Like that's just, it's coming. In some occupations or some industries sooner than other, but I think there's going to be a flavor of that across everything. And so what I'm looking at is they're going to be more attuned to that way. They almost got an edge without even knowing that they've got an edge in because they've been through everything. They've been through a lot. And that's a hard conversation to have. I've tried it. Even I have a niece she started high school this year. She made the volleyball team, JV. She was really excited. And then everything kind of got slipped. And then her parents were actually kind of, my brother and his wife were like, everything she's worked for to get to this point, to be on the volleyball team, to be an A student. And I was like, they'll be okay. I was like, she's going to be better for it in the long run, And I'm saying that and internally, and this is not like a sales pitch for our services or anything, but we've got some plans. We've got some plans of what we can try to do to help, and Layla can talk about that a little bit if she likes, about some ideas that we're thinking of trying to do to see what we can do to help a little bit in this situation.
I think with this pandemic, there were some areas that we were not doing well. And we didn't know because we were status quo, doing the same. The education system was the same. Now with this, like the employers needs to be more flexible. Okay, now I have to provide resources for my employees and keep them. Because I have to be thinking outside the box, but as an education system, as an employee, as a student, as a mother, all needs to be from now on, what are the things I'm going to be doing different for my health and for my family and for the community.
Yeah, I think for the silver linings for me are, like it was hard. It's hard to see how our kids lost on the experience and the stuff that they, the cool stuff, or what, the spring breaks and Acapulco and all of those things. And, their previous perceptions of what those things were going to be. But now they know it. Now they know it. It's over, and it's not so easy. So I hope that a silver lining is that there's some level of appreciation for being an adult and for being responsible for yourself, because we've all had to be responsible for ourselves. But a silver lining is the fact that I think we're forcing ourselves to look at it from a different lens, thinking differently and challenging ourselves. So I think also a silver lining is perhaps I hope we learn what is really important to us. What are we valuing? And I'm hoping that the value of money lessened and the value of people increased. Yes, I understand that that's easier said than done because I'm privileged. But what is really most important to you? Is it counting your money, counting your materials, having those things, or is it being healthy, being connected? What are we valuing and what are we treasuring every day? But also just like forcing ourselves to challenge everything. Something that on top of COVID, like Alma said, there were other things that happened over the year, especially from a social and a racial perspective here in America. I believe in El Paso, we absolutely need to have this conversation as a community. I asked Karina to pull some data, and just because we are in a minority community doesn't mean that we are not impacted by racism or that we don't have those behaviors. We need to really look inward and challenge ourselves and challenge our thinking and have intention with the change that we want to make moving forward. So that's the next area that workforce is going to be looking at, is who is our community and who are our customers, and are they one and the same? And if they're not, then we need to do better about that. So what I thought I was going to do in this job is not what I am doing, but I am doing stuff that I'm like, whoa, like I'm blowing my own mind sometimes. I'm like, ouch, like stop. This hurts my head. Like, and that's a whole other mental health issues, because how do I turn off my brain? Because I'm just thinking and holding, raising the bar.
Thinking so fast.
That's a concern I have for myself, because I know where I set the bar for myself. How fair is that to my peers, and how much can we actually get done and accomplish, and this whole bit. So there's a lot more there, but the desire, the capacity, all of those things are possible. I'm listening to you too. I know I'm tired, right? I know you're tired. I know everybody else is tired. So I'm like, we've got so much to do. But Bianca wants to take a month off of vacation. And I'm like,
not me. No.
So it's the balancing. How do we balance the enormity of what we need to get to with maybe not right now?
Well,
how do we balance that?
I'm going to get philosophical with the art of war here, because we're in a war, whether we realize it or not. This is a war, and a general will never stop because he has to win this war. And when we get to this point, and I totally can relate, because it's like your brains are like, oh, we can try this and this. And it's just, But it's cool, right? Because it's like, oh, I want to do this. And I know all of you feel the same way. But in the art of war, a general doesn't give them a break. A general brings more soldiers in. And that's, I think, what we kind of have to like look at. That's going to be what I have to say about, yes, I get that we have to stop. And the majority of people do need this break. We need a break too. And we, I'll be gone next week. But, I'm not, for me, definitely a month off. A general is not going to take a month off.
Right.
And those who are generals in this war, I think need to find a way to strategize to where you build more support to do all of those things that are blowing your mind and all of these grenades that we have to address these issues, because that's the only way we're going to win. That's the only way I feel that we're going to make an impact and have a dent. But we have this momentum right now as developers and all of our partners doing the same thing. We can't stop right now. We can't. And that's my Art of War book. I remember I read that one. I listened to that and I'm like, no, don't stop. Keep doing it. Don't stop. Just hire a few more soldiers.
That's what we need to do, is give this group a break, and this group, you're on the front lines. And then when you're tired, they come back, and you just learn to, coming full circle back to workforce. That is the future of work. Not everybody needs to be around at the same time. Not everybody needs to keep an eye on one another. Not everybody has to be competing with one another in the office. Is now, how do we go from everybody running the same race to putting you in a baton, right? Pass the baton. Is you run the first leg, I run the second leg, and that's a different way of using the team. That's exactly my point, is shedding these constructs of, why can't somebody work literally from 2 a.m. to 8 a.m.? Maybe that's when they do their best work. Let them do that, but no, it's always, this is the way it's always been. And no, that's not right. It's not fair. But if a complete whole definition to fairness, that's another silver lining.
I think we talked about this. I don't know. I have to confess, I dream of work and solutions in my head. I do. I mean, I'm like,
that is good.
I'm solving problems in my dreams, but
that's good, because that's your brain taking everything that's happening over the day and compartmentalizing. Like, okay, Alma's got like all this. I'm gonna not cuss,
but you have to rest, Alma.
No, I know. But what I wanted to share though is, in regards to the future world of work, and you're talking about the different things and being open and different schedules and things like that. I mean, I can tell you in sometimes when I get out of school here or break or vacation, I'd go spend time in Juarez. And my aunts I worked either teachers or they were a director out of school or something, but I ended up in the schools. But something that was really interesting is they had shifts. You had like your morning shifts, or you could have your afternoons. And there was also a break. So it wasn't back to back. It wasn't like you know what I mean? There was a good break in between, and it wasn't a 1 hour lunch break. It was like, it seemed longer, right, Karina? Those things did work. And I think it's one of those things where, because to your point, like we can't rely on, well, we've always done it this way, because that's out the door. And to what you were saying, the way employers are going to do now, the way work is coming, the sooner we can get our alignment again. And there was strategies to align K through 12, post-secondary, and workforce. Here in Texas, it's called the Tri-Agency. I feel like I'm always pitching WSB, but anyway, can't help it.
Have to.
But so there was that already, but again, it's that alignment. But beyond just the curriculum, it's the design of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like from a workforce perspective, we can share this information of what we see, the way shifts in employers, so that students are used to that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So yeah, we're getting into solutions. I don't want to get too far into solutions. I definitely, after reading the NPR article and hearing about Las Cruces, I kind of now want to make this a series where we talk to teachers and hear them. And in this talking about alignment. So we've heard some students, and obviously it's not the entire scope, but we will have sessions, listening sessions with more down the road. We'll talk to teachers, and then we'll maybe make the third session as our solution, so everyone can kind of follow the track of where we're going and see what we do with it. But I think this was a great conversation. I think this really brought out a lot of everybody, and how are we going to fight the rest of this war? but I'm ready. So
maybe the first solution when we are ready to have all these solutions, maybe it won't be the perfect solution, but maybe we can change it and we can now. It didn't work, but now it helped us as a learning experience that it didn't work, that we need to do in another route. It's not that we have the answer, not that we work for solutions developers have always the solutions, but we can try different paths to get to the achievement, to the goal that we want.
Maybe we change our name to Workforce Options.
And it's so funny that you say that, Karina, because that approach is the approach that Layla has kind of stressed with all of us, knowing full well we don't know what to do really because this is so new to us. So try experiment and go for it. And if it doesn't work, then go for the next, accept the failure and move on and learn from it and do it again. and yeah, but the having the platform to be able to do that without fear, I think has also been very helpful with this organization. And that approach might even be something that we need to apply to the education industry sector, not industry.
And so the situation continues. We acknowledge that this is overwhelming, but as public servants, we accept this challenge. We welcome feedback. In fact, we encourage it. Shoot us your thoughts, your gripes, your realities when it comes to this particular situation. Remember, this is part 1 of the education series, and we will be hearing from others that we feel can contribute to solutions in future episodes. The purpose of this podcast, remember, is to come together in building the road to redevelopment for our workforce and economy, especially as we rise from the aftermath of the pandemic, which we very much acknowledge still exists. We don't always have a choice in the situations we face, but you do have a choice in subscribing to solutions. Join the Workforce Situation Room on your favorite podcast platform and hit subscribe, where you'll find a solution to every situation.